Very good. It's 2 o'clock. We're going to get started now. My name is Tamara Vogel, and I am a sales consultant at Ocean View at Falmouth, and I work primarily with our assisted living and our memory care. So today's session is, we have these educational sessions monthly, and if you've been here before, either in person or on a Zoom with us, welcome back. If this is your first time joining us, we're so very happy to have you. Today's event is sponsored by our assisted living Falmouth House and our legacy memory care. Want to welcome our guest today and tell you a little bit about him. We're going to be talking today about embracing age and building an age-positive Maine, and that's both individual and as a community. Something to think about while you're listening to our presentation today is about what we think and feel and believe about getting older. Now, we are a 55 and older retirement community with a continuum of care here. So we are right in the mix of getting older and how to do that with positivity. We believe that things about getting older matter. And we believe that positive beliefs of our own aging and the aging of those around us, research has found, can add years to your life. And we'll hear more about that today. Age-positive beliefs also lead to a better brain health, less chronic diseases, and anxiety. So some things to be thinking about today while you listen to our presentation. We will be taking questions in our chat throughout the presentation. Initially, our presenter today will be asking a few survey questions. They will pop up on your screen and you'll be able to answer them. And then if you have questions in the chat, I will interrupt when I feel the question is appropriate and will enhance the conversation at the time. If we don't get to your questions as you bring them up, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenter today. There he is. This is Don Harden. He is a project manager with Power in Aging. And Don is the founding board member of the Maine Council on Aging, and he coordinates the Power in Aging project, MCOA's new anti-ageism campaign. He's been affiliated with Catholic Charities of Maine for over 43 years, and most recently as director of Aging Services. He was a convener of the commission let me start that sentence again. He was convener of the Maine Aging Initiative's work group on workforce and the economy, served on the Legislative Commission to study long-term care, workforce issues, and represents the voice of older workers on the State Workforce Board. He serves as a care partner with his mother, who lives independently and celebrated her 100th birthday, May 30th. We're very happy to have you here with us, Don. Welcome. I've seen the presentation and I really enjoyed it. So without further ado, Don Harden.
Thank you so much. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you today. I'm very excited about being able to do this presentation. And first, I'm going to share my slide deck presentation. Give me a second. And I'm going to assume that everybody can see that and everybody can hear me. So if not, make sure you send a note to Tamara or Dustin, and I'll try to speak up better. So as was mentioned earlier, this presentation is part of Power and Aging project, and it's from the Maine Council on Aging. We launched this project almost 2 years ago. And if you don't know, the Maine Council on Aging is a broad network of almost 140 businesses and organizations and older Mainers that we advance policy initiatives to ensure that we all can live healthy, engaged, secure lives as we age. And if you go back before 2020, the Maine Council on Aging, which by the way, just celebrated our first decade of service. We're in our second decade. And you're going to hear a lot about ageism and age positivity today, but we weren't addressing ageism head on. We didn't appreciate how much of a barrier it was to all of the things that we were working on, all our priorities. But suffice it to say that in 2020, the year of COVID kicking in, we learned through the experience of COVID that ageism was pretty critical, and we needed to address it head on. So we set up this project. So the formula for the Power and Aging project is pretty simple. We know that ageism is bad for us. It's bad for our systems, bad for the economy, but most importantly, ageism results in less public support dollars going into aging programs and supporting people as we age. But we also understand if everybody becomes more aware of their age bias, and that's kind of the spoiler alert for today, is we all have age bias. I'm the anti-ageism guy doing presentations, but I'm constantly trying to get in touch with my own age bias and what to do about that. But if we become more aware of it, more sensitive to it, we're less likely to act on it. So what we're doing at the Maine Council on Aging is doing presentations and even better, holding conversations about age bias and how to address it. So we meet with media about age positive, age accurate reporting. We meet with legislators. We meet with HR teams at some of our employers about how to create age positive workplaces. We meet with healthcare people, public health, parks, something like Parks and Recs, which does a lot of services for older people, public health, and so on. We even created a leadership exchange where we're hosting some of the top leaders in the state for a 14-hour intensive on ageism and how to address it. So it's been pretty exciting work. And I always like to put right up front, what might be some of the questions that might arise today. So these are some of the questions for the presentation today, particularly those middle ones. What is ageism? What is it? What is it? What are its impacts? And how we all can see and change our own ageism. And this whole thing of stereotypes, there are negative age stereotypes and positive age stereotypes. So how can we kind of debunk all the negative age stereotypes that we're constantly confronted with and develop what we call an age positive attitude? And this is kind of like in the Power and Aging Project. This is what you could say we believe. We believe that we can learn more about our own age bias and so on, and we can embrace positive beliefs about growing older, and we can listen for those negative age stereotypes, and we can flip them. We can shift them to positive. And as we'll be talking about aging today, I always like to do a little bit in terms of the definition, because what we often hear when we're out, in the community or in society, so to speak, is this kind of biological definition of aging. And true, there's a lot going on with our bodies and so on as we age. But that kind of makes talking about aging a little anxiety producing. It kind of taps into some of our fears, what I call the three Ds, the fear of decline, disability, and even death. And it's because we're constantly confronted with that biological definition, but it's an incomplete definition. So I like to make sure we embrace the fuller definition of aging, all the dimensions of it, that it's really the one thing that we're all doing. We're all aging. And so it's kind of a universal lifelong process, and it has biological dimensions to it, but also psychological, social, and spiritual dimensions of it. Very dynamic. It's up and down. It's back and forth, multi-dimensional, multi-directional. So just appreciate this fuller definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about aging. So I shared questions for today's presentation. But before we go any further, I'd like to ask all of you a question. We've learned the value of engaging people early on in our presentations and conversations. So I want to ask you, and you can chat here, put it, and maybe we should clarify whether we're going to be doing this in the chat function or the Q&A function, Tamara and Dustin. I think if the chat function is open, it's probably easier. If not, we'll put it in the Q&A. But the question is, like, when you think of an older person, what are the words or phrases that come to mind? And maybe, Tamara, you can help me monitor what words. I just want to hear what's top of mind.
Absolutely, Don.
Yeah,
I'm going to just say, let's put it in the chat.
okay.
So as your chat comes up, I will just read off some of those words and phrases for everyone to hear. Oh, looks like we've gone to the Q&A.
Okay.
Okay, wise and experienced.
Wise and experienced. Wonderful.
I'm getting somebody has their chat disabled. Try the Q&A, please. If you're either one, whatever you go into, I'll grab them both. Mature,
Yeah.
not valued enough. Losses. That could be in a variety of topics.
Yeah.
Slow moving, white haired, arthritic, experienced. Wizard of Oz. Interesting.
Never
Deteriorating.
heard that one before. That's
Yeah.
a great one.
Deteriorating. I mean,
Yeah.
the theme I see here is some are very positive and some not so much. Real life
Yes.
wisdom. Wobbly. I think some of you are just being entertaining here. Not speedy at doing things. Senile. Haven't heard that in a while. We try to avoid that word.
Right.
Conservative, medical needs, calm, acceptance, balanced perspective, repository of knowledge about job and family, insight. It seems to have slowed down there, Don. How's that for a good amount of
Okay.
work?
That's a great start. And I have to say, we may just want to shut this presentation down right now. There were definitely some negative things said, so to speak, or real things said. But that's probably the most positive things I've ever had doing this exercise in about 70 presentations. So kudos to all of you. But it is true that, whenever we do this exercise, and I appreciate you for sharing, it's amazing some of the negative stereotypes that surface. And this is a picture of, for example, and if we had time, we could create a word cloud of the words that were just contributed. This is a word cloud from one of my many sessions. This is actually a group of leaders. They did the same exercise, and this is what it looked like. And sadly, this is what it looks like in most of the sessions that I do. So it's this whole thing. And when I do it in person with people, it's amazing, once again, to observe when you're in the room with people, how quickly these negative stereotypes are surfaced. And I'm always struck, there's a little bit of sadness too, when people say them out loud, because sometimes they're really trying to describe the situation for other people, but they're also this internal dialogue about beliefs that they hold about themselves. So the point is here is that we do all carry around these negative beliefs and stereotypes about aging, which when activated, lead us to hold expectations of how we that are aging behave in our capabilities and limit us in different ways. But what is the effect of holding positive beliefs about aging or always activating positive stereotypes? As Tamara said earlier, the research tells us that we have the potential to live longer. And if not longer life span, better health span. I mean, really, 7.5 years longer. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. And once again, the research tells us that people that live with purpose and meaning live twice as long and have less dementia. I mean, I'm an example of somebody who's worked further into my later life. By the way, I'm 72. One of the things we often say, like, would we share our age? So I'll share my age, but I'm still working partially, and a lot of it has to do with purpose and meaning. But people are healthier if they're active, and also that we who are aging can get happier with age. Quite remarkable. A lot of people think you're less happy as you get older, but it's kind of not always the case. Joy and gratitude has great health benefits. And maybe you've heard of this thing called the blue zones. Blue zones is a term that refers to these geographical areas that exist in the world, and in some cases in places you wouldn't expect, and places that are not as well off economically, where there are low rates of chronic disease and people live longer than anywhere else. There's an inordinate number of centenarians, people that reach 100. And I have to say, in one of my sessions, one of the guys who was 97 said to me, he told me his goal was to be a super centenarian. And he said, "Do you know what that is?" I said, "No, I actually don't." He said, "It's people who live to be 110. But once again, in the cataloging of why people live so long with less chronic illnesses, it's again living with purpose and holding age-positive beliefs and practices. And this is what holding age-positive beliefs about aging looks like. This is my walking blue zone here. I always try to work my mother into any presentations I'm involved with. And this is her turning 100 past May. Now, everybody always remarks like, well, she must have good genes. Well, yes, she has good genes, but likely more importantly is that she holds these age-positive beliefs. She arises every morning with a sense of purpose and meaning and practices healthy aging. And sometimes that purpose and meaning is as simple as like, I'm going to polish the silver today. I mean, who polishes silver nowadays? But that really keeps those kinds of activities keep her going. So, and there's this new thing that's out now called the new map of life. You on the Zoom today who played the game of life. We're going to have to create a new game called the new map of life. But it just talks about that. It predicts, for example, that as many as half of today's 5-year-olds can expect to live to be the age of 100, and that we better be longevity ready. So it's kind of like, how do we create communities that are longevity ready for this increase in centenarians, and really reinforcing that having people living longer is actually a positive for society. So if the benefits of holding age-positive beliefs are so compelling, then why do we activate age-negative stereotypes within ourselves when we have the power to activate age-positive stereotypes? Why don't we all hold these age-positive beliefs? I mean, why aren't we building a more age-equitable and age-inclusive Maine with healthier people and communities by addressing age bias in all its forms? Or put another way, what's holding us back, like this anchor here, from living our best lives into old age, seeing we who are aging as valuable contributors to our society and economy, and making those investments in creating longevity-ready communities? So what's keeping us from seeing the whole person? Not a person in need or a frail, vulnerable person, but a person with long-lived experience, like you said earlier, who continues to contribute to society in a multitude of ways. And so obviously, we're here in part to talk about ageism. So ageism is what we see as holding us back, not seeing each other as we age together. And so it's very unproductive stereotypes that some of you surfaced a little while ago that are holding us back. But we believe by understanding age bias, we can, with intention, build age-positive culture. So that's our goal at the Maine Council on Aging, ending ageism over the next decade and building an age-positive culture. And in terms of this whole thing about eliminating stereotypes, let's just list out some of the most unproductive stereotypes that challenge us, that people believe about we who are aging, that we too often believe ourselves. Kind of like the cultural narrative about aging and older people. Let me just list a few out, okay? You can't teach an old dog new tricks, meaning as we age, we lose the ability to learn new things. And our cognitive abilities inevitably decline, and all older persons experience dementia. Older persons are fragile, so they should avoid exercise, and because of the biology of an aging body, they can't benefit from adapting healthy aging behaviors. Older persons can't do technology. Well, I guess we've eliminated that one already because we're all sitting here on a Zoom session, taking this all in. Older persons are bad drivers. Older persons are selfish and don't contribute to society. They've messed up the environment, and you've heard some of these things. And of course, as somebody who's still working part-time, older persons aren't effective in the workplace. We can revisit these big stereotypes and sort of prove that they're wrong, okay? So let's talk about ageism. So here's a global view about ageism across societies. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. It's like the air around us, invisible, often unnoticed, but we're always breathing it in. We're swimming in it. And I often get asked, like, well, why am I quoting from the World Health Organization? Well, pre-COVID, during COVID, and continuing on, the World Health Organization's biggest concern, arguably, has been the impact of ageism on the health of our world population. They have a whole worldwide campaign to address ageism. So ageism is three things. It refers to the stereotypes, how we think, what you shared earlier, prejudice and bias, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act, directed towards people on the basis of their age. And like most other isms, it occurs within us, between people, within systems, within organizations. It is this whole thing about privilege, because it's really an idealizing of youth when we're talking about ageism. So, and I've got this infographic on the next slide, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about ageism on one little picture. So it talks about ageism across society and the different levels of ageism. And it's important, the point is that it's important to become aware of the ageism at each level, and that you have an invitation to take action to address it. So systemic ageism is age-related bias across society. With systemic ageism, it's the cultural messages that we're bombarded with daily. And actually, I would say early in our lives that there's something wrong with getting older, something to be resisted, something to be feared. And it's the resource allocation decisions we make, which are often unfair to older people. Like during the days of COVID in particular, our state legislature provided free school lunches to all children, which was a wonderful idea. But at the same time, the wait list at Meals on Wheels for older people just got longer. So it's this whole thing of like equitable, age equitable distribution of resources. And then the policies and rules that we create that sometimes discriminate against older people. So living within that system of ageism in society kind of, once again, influences our thoughts and beliefs and actions, and we see it at different levels. So we talk about internalized ageism, which lies within individuals and within all of us. So the internalized ageism is our private beliefs and our assumptions and our biases, our stereotypes about older people, about aging, including our own aging. and they can be conscious or unconscious. But in fact, we know that 80% of our mind works unconsciously, so much of it is unconscious. So, for example, examples of internalized ageism is making that decision that you're not going to keep going to that yoga class or that Tai Chi class, even though it's good for your balance and might prevent falls because you're too old. You think you're too old. And when I say you, I'm not necessarily speaking, I'm talking about the collective you within society, not necessarily all of you on this Zoom community, because I can't see you or I've never met you. So it could also be, for example, going to the doctor's office and not telling the doctor everything because you think, well, I'm just getting old and I shouldn't bother the doctor with such things. That's internalized ageism. And then there's interpersonal ageism, which occurs between people and can affect our relationships and interactions with friends and family and others. So we see that a lot in something called elder speak, where we might go to a doctor's appointment or go to a bank and depending on what somebody takes away from seeing us, is they start talking to us in kind of that disrespecting or patronizing speech, or they raise their voice, they start yelling really loud, or they turn to a younger person that you're accompanied by. So that whole example of that, and which can often be, can really diminish people's experience and their sense of self-worth. And also, in some situations, people can end up getting less than good service because the person really isn't hearing them. They're ignoring their points of view and being overly accommodating and so on. And so that's kind of the interpersonal ageism. And then, there can be institutional ageism. Whenever I take my mother for some of her medical appointments, the way the office is designed, she has to walk a mile to get, she's on a walker, she has to walk a mile from the elevator to the office. And I'm always thinking like, okay, couldn't have been thinking about their patients, their older patients, and how this was designed. So this whole thing about, how do we get to ageism? As I said earlier, ageism is like the air around us. We're always breathing it in, we're swimming in it, and we're daily bombarded by this messaging, but it also starts pretty early. For example, when I'm with my mother and my 5-year-old granddaughter is there, I have to appreciate that she's like a sponge. She's taking in everything that I'm saying and how I'm respecting my mother. So it's daily, but it also starts pretty early. And this is just some examples of the cultural messaging. If you stood in the line at the grocery store or whatever, you've seen the magazines, once again, sort of looking younger is really what it's all about. And this whole concept of fighting aging, it's interesting. It gets kind of complicated. I've been noticing recently that a lot of the wonderful products that are out there to help with healthy aging, like fitness things and flexibility things, they're all titled things like aging backwards or fighting aging or whatever. It's got good material, but it's something about the concept. It's complicated. So the cultural messaging, and here's another form of cultural messaging. I always hate to put this up on the screen, probably one of the worst things, but this whole thing of age-based humor, there's so much of it out there now. I'm not exactly sure what this is all about, that we have such a proliferation of age-based humor out there that that we have a hard time not even laughing at ourselves, but it says some pretty disturbing things about getting old. And I don't have anything up on the slide deck right at the moment, but also, you know, if you read the paper every day, there's a lot of things in the paper sometimes. We've been working closely with the media about age positive and age accurate reporting. But I remember in the second year of COVID, I think the restaurants were starting to allow outside eating. There was a whole article that talked about, well, the seniors are they better show up early, you know, so they can get the early bird special. And then, you know, then I read this whole commentary online in response to the article, and there was a whole conversation about whether people they better get out of there before it gets dark because they wouldn't be able to drive home. And fortunately, well, somebody wrote in a pretty strong letter to the editor, like how offensive it was, you know, to be assumed that you're an early bird special, can't drive home, kind of older person. So, and the other thing is a lot of the services that we depend upon, you know, so ageism is pervasive, but at the same time, it can be really invisible. So some of the services that we sometimes are looking for, they don't even talk about age in inviting us into their services. One of these organizations is a domestic violence program, almost like people that get older don't experience domestic violence. And you know, just to share this national poll on ageism, which kind of documents the prevalence of ageism among adults 50 to 80, 82%. But I'm more interested in the poll that we're going to ask right now, that Dustin's going to launch here, which is that I'd like to hear from all of you. Given the prevalence of ageism, have you ever experienced or witnessed ageism? So it's a simple yes/no question. If you could just please respond.
Don, this is Tamara. I'm not able to click on an answer. So are we asking folks to put a yes or no in the Q&A?
The poll probably works for people other than you.
Okay.
It does not work for the host or the panelists. So
Perfect. As long as you're seeing some answers, that's all that matters.
well, I'm not seeing them yet.
Oh, I see down here, host and panelists cannot vote.
Are people out in
I'm getting, hi there, this is Dustin.
Yeah.
The poll is up. It's up
Okay.
for about 60 seconds now. We have about 2/3 of our participants that have answered. We'll let it go another moment or so, but currently
Cool.
22 people say yes, 16 people say no, and those numbers are still going up a little bit.
Okay, cool. So we'll let it go another minute, maybe.
All right. With that, I've got about 3/4 of folks that have given an answer. So I'll end the poll for now. I still see some numbers going up, so I'm happy to get more answers in there. Yeah, with that, I will hit end poll, and hopefully you can see some results. Can you see any results right now, or I can just read them to you?
I'm not seeing any results, but maybe it's because the slide deck's up. So
Well, it's no problem. We have
Yep.
24 of our guests have said yes, they have experienced age bias or age discrimination, but 19 say no. So it's almost a 50-50 split.
yeah, it's great. Thank you. So thank you for sharing, and thank you, Dustin, for doing that. Your own personal experience of ageism. You know, once again, well, now I'm seeing the poll, Dustin. Look at that.
Yeah, there's a share
Yeah.
button. Yep.
Yeah, 56% say yes, they have witnessed or experienced age bias, age discrimination. 44% said no. So once again, the good news is that the group that I'm with today has probably had a better experience with ageism than what is typical. When we do virtual presentations, we always poll participants on whether they have experienced or witnessed ageism. Probably done it almost 70 times. It's usually plus or minus around 90%. And we also do this quite often when we go into like workplaces, going to a place like LL Bean with just the HR people, which is like 80 people. And once again, we'll ask them in their HR position, have they seen ageism? And it's usually a very high percentage. But so just to quickly talk about, continue on with the theme of ageism, that it is quite prevalent, and I'm sure it's concerning for the people that said they have experienced it or witnessed it. And one of the things is in terms of like the prevalence of ageism, is this whole thing about why we should care about addressing ageism, because it has impacts. And one of the impacts is how it interacts with other types of isms. So this whole concept of intersectionality, where various forms of inequality kind of operate together and kind of exacerbate each other. So for example, and we just did a big study on this, older women, and once again, I'm not necessarily talking directly to people on the Zoom community today. I'm talking about generally in society, older women that have experienced kind of this economic disparity over many years, quite often end up living alone, and they may have a very different experience of income security than an older man. So this whole thing of intersectionality. And just to quickly say, we have impacts at the workplace. There is a fair amount of age discrimination at the workplace. But separate from that, this whole thing of like we would really benefit at the workplace with having more older workers recruited and retained, and we would also experience, besides leveraging the power of older workers, leveraging the power of multi-generational work teams. And certainly in Maine, we have a significant workforce shortage, so that would really be beneficial. Similarly, the impacts of ageism in terms of business, you remember the visuals that we put up that markets to youth. And it is challenging to understand why businesses would not want to market differently to we who are aging and kind of control such wealth. I mean, we certainly have a lot of buying power. And one of the actions to combat structural ageism is for all ageism businesses to increase the inclusion and diversity of older persons in advertisements and present them in roles that reflect vitality. It's like sometimes with some of the businesses that are trying to get us to do more outside activity and healthy activity and stuff, you don't always see older people in the commercials for sure. And some of the products that I would imagine that older people would benefit from. It seems like the only commercials I see at night are Medicare related commercials. And then in terms of the impacts, I mentioned the whole thing about the World Health Organization identifying ageism as a major threat to our health. I mean, it is pretty significant. Their studies, they looked at the top 8 diseases in the United States, and they found that 1 in every $7, 63 billion spent on treating those diseases could be saved. If we could address the ageism, the 1 in $7 was due to ageism. And to be clear, I'm not just talking about ageism that might exist coming from the health practitioner side. It's also, what we do in terms of our own internalized ageism, what we take into those medical appointments, whether we practice healthy aging habits and so on. And we certainly learned a lot about the impacts of ageism during COVID. This whole thing of like the expendability of people that are older and the isolation and so on. So ageism is pervasive, and the impact is profound. So again, the questions are, why don't we see it? It's like, why don't we, disrupt it, address it? The benefits of holding age positive beliefs is so compelling. Again, the question is, why do we activate age negative stereotypes within ourselves when we have the power to activate age positive stereotypes? So as I said in my introduction, when people understand their own age bias, they're less likely to act on it. They are more likely to take positive steps to build age positive. So the most important action we can do to address ageism is to get in touch with our own internalized ageism. So it's good to ask yourself, what are my influences for what I believe about aging? And just think on that. And this is also kind of like what people around you believe. So just to appreciate this, and this is from research that was done by a national firm called the Frameworks Institute. And they found that the public perceptions about older people are incomplete and unrealistic. It's kind of like older people are either living a life of leisure, jetting back and forth between warmer climates and so on, or they're totally frail and dependent. And the public believes that ageism isn't really considered a real problem like the other isms, and that aging problems are the fault of the individual. That the family should have saved more. Where is the family? Why does the person need services? Those kinds of things. And that does really impact our experiences day to day in getting supports in society. So, and the other thing that has been found, and I'm just going to speak about this for a minute, which is the people who did research also did a lot of research on language around aging. And what they found that the language really matters, and that that the words we use are very important. And when we do presentations with media, for example, and healthcare, talking about age positive healthcare, we talk to them and remind them that that there are these things called style guides. So basically, when you pick up the paper, you're not supposed to see things like frail, vulnerable seniors kind of language, because that's not what media considers age positive, accurate reporting. And when you go into the doctor's office, this is kind of the orientation that the people in the medical office are supposed to be following, which is that don't use terms like seniors, elderly, the aged, and these other things. Don't other people don't use stereotypical language. And just to be clear, this isn't about political correctness. This is based on hard research, which found that that terms like senior and elderly, for example, they're kind of associated with the least competent and oldest among them, while terms like older person, older adult were seen on the younger end of the continuum, the more competent, capable end of the continuum. So these words really matter in terms of how people understand them. So we're going to try one more poll question, Dustin. And just to try this out, as I introduce this whole thing of language, I mean, what would you like to be called in the last third of your life? Elderly, senior, elder, older person, none of the above? So let's take a minute with this question.
All right, our poll is up and we're getting some answers. We'll let it go about a minute to a minute and a half and see how many responses we get. All right, poll has been up for over a minute now, and it should be known, Don, I let people make multiple choices if they had two preferences over any of them. So I will end the poll now and sharing results.
Okay. %0 want to be called the elderly. That's pretty clear. Oh, this is great. And just for the record, most people who are older don't like any of the terms, you know. So I'm not surprised that the majority picked none of the above. Or you're saying they could have answered twice. But that's remarkable. Yeah, remarkably to hear that strong view that nobody wants to be called the elderly. And of course, there's a lot of discussion nowadays about the term elder. It's, you know, a lot of people see that as a very positive term. So, and certainly in indigenous communities and so on, elder is a revered term. So thank you. That was very helpful. Okay, so we're getting in the last quarter of our time together, and there could still be questions and answers. So I'm going to keep moving along here. And so just a reminder that, you know, we have this opportunity to shift with intention to address ageism and to build a more age-positive culture, age-positive healthcare, age-positive workplaces. You know, the question is, what if we dumped our stereotypes about older people and helped each other build positive views about aging in themselves? So let's return to those, some of those big stereotypes I mentioned earlier. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, meaning as we age, we lose the ability to learn new things. Well, actually, you know, just to speak to that, actually, there are many positive cognitive changes in older age and opportunities for lifelong learning. And I say the research is pretty remarkable now about the capacity of our brains to be more resilient than we thought. I can remember in elementary school in the 50s, I still remember it when the teacher said you had like 12 billion neurons and they're gonna die and they're gonna decrease over time. I still remember that from the 50s. But I think the scientists are learning there's a different story there. The brains have a lot of resiliency and elasticity. And I could tell you stories. A good friend just retired at age 80. And what is he doing at age 80? He's learning French. And in a few weeks, I get to teach a class at the senior college. And so there's a lot of opportunities. So the second one was, and our cognitive abilities inevitably decline and all older persons experience dementia. Well, actually, as it turns out, dementia is not a normal part of aging. Most older persons do not experience dementia. And I have to say, senior moment, the use of the term senior moment might be the most overused and inaccurate myths of aging. If I could change 5 or 6 things, that would be on my list to stop using the cliche senior moment, because it is rarely accurate, but we hear it a lot. At the workplace, for example, oh, you're late for the meeting. You must have had a senior moment. So there's that. And then older persons are fragile, so they should avoid exercise. And because of the biology of aging, they won't benefit from adapting healthy aging behaviors. Well, actually, most people consult with your physician first, can exercise and benefit physically, mentally, and emotionally from exercise. And it's really never too late to benefit from healthy behaviors. So older persons can't do technology. Well, actually, older people possess the ability to adapt to and learn new technology. I mean, once again, we're on a Zoom session here, but I think we proved during COVID how incredible people were shifting to using technology so they wouldn't be isolated. and so they could stay doing the things that gave them purpose and meaning. And I think if we did another poll, which I'm not going to do, I would ask how many people use a computer or a smartphone on social media. I think the results would be quite impressive. My mother got her first smartphone at 98, so this is the kind of thing. And then older persons are bad drivers. Actually, crashes with older persons is quite low. And we're more likely to use seat belts, follow speed limits, not text, and drive drunk or in bad weather conditions, and so on. So I won't go any further down the list, but there are a lot of negative stereotypes out there, but most of them can be debunked for sure. So you've been very attentive and open and generous in your sharing today in time. I'd like to end with inviting you to join at the Maine Council on Aging, AgePositive movement. As I said earlier, we set this goal of ending ageism in Maine over the next decade. And so I'd love to invite people to visit our website, our Power and Aging Project website, and take the pledge, join the AgePositive movement, and stand for a Maine that's age equitable, where people of all ages are seen as necessary and respected members of society. And at the pledge, we've listed some actions that you can consider taking. This particular pledge, by the way, the pledge I just showed you is for individuals. We also have one for businesses, but there are different actions that you can take, and I won't go through all of them, but it really has to do with, like, the language we use and how we talk about aging, and kind of living our aging out loud, and that we're all aging, and the positives of age positive beliefs. Once again, here's a second slide. And get involved in your local community, or if you read things in the paper that you feel are denigrating to people that are older, then write a letter to the editor. If you're called a name, a senior citizen, for example, or whatever, a geriatric case, those kinds of things, speak up. If you're active in your community, find out what's going on to make your community an age-friendly community, or age-positive, longevity ready. There's a lot that can go on. So, a couple of minutes, Tamara, for questions.
Yeah, I did have one specific question around what percentage of the population is over 65.
I don't have that number in my head, but it's easily accessible. It's a pretty big number. And it might be, we are, once again, officially the oldest state in the country. It might be like 40% or something like that, I think. It's a big number. That's one of the reasons, like, when we go out and talk to employers, we say that there's a strong business case, because older workers have a lot of attributes that you want in your workplace, but also in terms of just sheer numbers of people available to hire and retain, it's the people at least over 50 and over 65. So.
Yeah, I would also say there was a trend. There was a trend of some comments, not necessarily questions, around staying positive when the environment around us, things like climate. I would have to add, politics, things going on in other countries. Just there's some negativity going on in the world around us, the broader world, and even our closer network world, about staying positive with those types of influences coming at us all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I guess two things. One is that I assume that's a general comment across all ages.
Yes.
Yes.
And there
And
was
so,
reference there was reference in that thread to the fact that our youth also face a lot
Yeah.
of challenges. The world today presents them with, housing difficulties and job difficulties, and they have their own world of challenges. And sometimes being older has a benefit in their eyes because we've been through that. So it's kind of looking at the two sides of the coin.
that's really interesting. But that's definitely, in general, I mean, and because you make choices, right, about when you're experiencing, those kind of events, and how do you manage that? We all need to have a sort of a wellness toolkit that we implement every day. But I know, once again, I don't mean to keep saying my mother, but I know with my mother, that the news has been lately taking a toll on her. So she's decided to turn it off. So just not listen to it. But I think it's that whole thing about how do we get support when this stuff is going on. So and were there other things?
There haven't been a lot of questions. A couple of references to Tom Muser.
Yes.
I mean, do you know who that is? I'm not familiar with the name.
Absolutely. Besides, he's just a great guy, and he's a psychologist, of course, and he's the head of the Center for Excellence in Aging and Health at UNE. And both my wife and I are what's called what do we call it? Legacy scholars, I think, which means that we participate in the things at the Center for Excellence in Aging and Health. So it's a good thing to get involved in. And certain little research projects go on. The other thing that, not to get off on another thread, but the other thing that my wife and I both do is we are what are called GEMS, which is an acronym which stands for Geriatric Experience Mentor at UNE. So what this is about is that people that are older can be mentors for people going through medical school. So we have these appointments at our house every other month where they come in, and so it's all about creating future doctors that know how to do age-positive healthcare. So that's a really good thing to get involved in. UNE does lots of cool things. So
that's very interesting. And there was also a reference to a book recommended called "This Chair Rocks: A Manifesto Against Ageism" by Ashton Applewhite.
Yes. Yeah, she's great. She's great. And she also, one of the things that could be shared, I could send you the link. She has a TED Talk that's great. So read the book or watch the TED Talk or both. And it's interesting to me, growing, thank you, Elizabeth. It's interesting to me that kind of growing up on sort of the ethic of the 60s, I guess, her approach to addressing ageism, a lot of it is kind of what we'd call sensitivity training, the experience of, conversation and sort of, these really kind of deep sensitizing questions, about aging and ageism. So she's really good. So.
Great. We've just got another minute or so before I wrap it up for us. We do want to try to end at 3 o'clock for everybody's time. Your comments have been great. Hopefully you've had some good answers to them as Don did the presentation. Yes, you will get a copy of this presentation, which will show the slides, and anything, Don, that you want to send to either Dustin or myself as a link or added information, we can certainly get out to this group. Any one last question? I'm not seeing anything in the chat or the Q&A, but I'll give it another 5 seconds.
Tamara, I do have some info from an earlier comment. Basically, I found information from the 2020 census that puts Maine at the #1 state for population age 65 or older. Maine has a population of about 1.3 million people, about 294,000 of which are ages 65 or older. That
There
puts
we
us
go.
at 21.8% of our population at age 65 or older. That's higher than Florida or any other state.
That's great.
Yeah.
That you clarified that, because I kind of overstated the number. And if there is a way, Tamara, if people want to submit things that, like in the resource line, I would certainly be glad to share resources, like a couple of things we just mentioned, like the TED Talk, and if there's some things that to be followed up on. I don't know how you communicate with the people that are here today.
Dustin, are we, I've got one person asking if they can see the chats when they get if they look at the recording. And I wondered if there were an opportunity for people to submit things back to us that can be shared through Don.
I don't believe chats will be recorded. I gotta say, I'm not entirely sure. Those are generally just for now in the moment. I believe the recording on YouTube will just be our faces and the presentation, screen sharing, things like that.
Yeah, you can save the chat. There's a way to save the chat. If you go to the bottom of the chat stream and you see those three little dots down there.
Oh, I see it. Save chat.
Right. I don't know if you can save the question and answers. Let's look.
So
there is a way to.
Here's an example of Don, who's older than Dustin, teaching him something.
It is a
That's
good
true.
Actually,
He's the bigger thing is actually it's the cross generation. So it's that whole thing of like, how do we get the benefits of the power of age diversity? It was really like me not teaching Dustin anything, but we working together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's probably. But we did learn a lot, didn't we, Dustin? That was good. So
sure did.
Intergenerational learning is something that we do promote here at Ocean View. I know we do a lot with the high school students here in Falmouth, with our folks living in assisted living and in memory care and in our independent community. So we really do try to focus on that.
Yeah. And one last thing I'm going to say, one of the things we're doing at the Power and Aging Project, we're creating lots of things, but one of them is a toolkit for people to have community conversations. So there may be some interest in some of your places for people to gather and talk further about some of this stuff. So.
We're past our time. Somebody's asking about mentors for civil engineers, and then what about stats in Vermont? I mean, I think Dustin was able to find those over 65 stats pretty easily for Maine. So if you're interested, perhaps you can do that Google search.
I'll rattle it off right now if you like.
Okay.
Vermont is the 4th state in terms of population age 65 or older. The resource for this, by the way, I just gave it a quick Google search, but the website is Population Reference Bureau. That's prb.org. And they're really just relaying information from the 2020 census. Vermont has a population of about 623,000 people. That's about half as many people as Maine. With 129,000 people age 65 or older. That's 20.6% of the population, compared to Maine's 21.8%. So Maine's number 1, Vermont's number 4.
And Don, I guess I want to ask, some of these comments, perhaps we can reference the program at the University of New England that you are involved in, if people want to check the website out and look into that.
Sure. Did you say you wanted something from me, or do you want me to just say it was the University of New England Center for Excellence in Aging and Health? Or
yeah, I mean, I guess we can. I mean, if people are listening, they can go ahead and research that at the University of New England. I just want to make sure folks, if they were interested in more about that program and any mentoring.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned two things. One was the Legacy Scholar option at the Center for Excellence in Aging and Health at the University of New England, and the other thing was in the medical school. There is this geriatric experienced mentor program. So
Okay, well, I'm going to wrap us up for today, and
Yeah.
I'll just come back in and say a few things as we Hi there. We had a really good attendance today, so we're very happy about that. And I want to thank Don for a really interesting and educational topic that you covered. One person in the comments said that you really had them thinking, and it's kind of like you learn something and then you step back out into the world and you're going to think about what you say and what you see and what you feel a little differently because you've learned a little bit more about that topic. So, and it affects us all. I love the comment that said we start aging at day one. So it's not particular to any one person. So thank you so much, Don. This video will be on YouTube, and Dustin will you be sending a link out for that, Dustin?
Yeah, so for everyone here who has registered in advance, I have your email address, and you've probably seen other emails from me. I will send it to basically everybody, whether or not they showed up or not. But if you joined us today without having formally registered, you're welcome to just email me or call our front desk, anything that's easiest for you, and I'm happy to email that out. It will be on Ocean View at Falmouth's YouTube page,
Okay.
hopefully by the end of today, or certainly by tomorrow. Sometimes it's a long video, it'll take a while to upload.
Very good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you participating, and have a good rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.